Very good. Okay, so now we're back to our normal questioning. I have a question for taxation, and I believe we're at Mr. Bowman. At the start of our nation, the Founding Fathers implemented tariffs and apportionment. Today we have a progressive tax system. Out of all the tax plans available, which one best represents your tax philosophy? 1 minute, please.
I support the no tax. I don't believe in fact using coercion and force to get things done. That was what I was saying in my opening statement. Taxation is theft. However, we need revenue. I support voluntary means of acquiring revenue by charging for certain government services. For instance, if you had a small percentage fee attached to the enforcement of contracts that were paid by people entering into contracts based upon the value to be at stake, then that would be a means of raising revenue, and it would be voluntary because you wouldn't have to pay that fee to get the contract. However, if you didn't pay the fee, the government would not enforce that contract for you.
Mr. Heckman.
Yes, taxes, death and taxes. I mean, those are things that we have to face, and the government does need to be taxed. But you know that in 1900, total tax revenues, state, local, and federal, for the typical family in this country was 6%. Now it's certainly in excess of 40%. It's way, way too high. I've already said earlier, I support the fair tax. I had said, there's still some information out there, you know, the 999, at least it's understandable to move it toward the fair tax. That may be a good way to go. There's no beautiful way to make this happen, but we have to eliminate the 16th Amendment to have this fair tax, which allowed for income tax. You know, it was during that period of time that we had some bad amendments go into the Constitution. One was the 17th Amendment. We ought to be elected by our state legislature rather than by... We need to be responsive to the state. That's what the Senate's supposed to be like. So we had some bad amendments in there. We need to change those.
Our federal tax policy affects our family.
Hold on, I have one follow-up, moderator follow-up for Mr. Heckman.
Yes, sir.
The fair tax, which is really a national sales tax, what's the constitutional authority for that?
Well, that's a great question. Obviously, there's a lot of people that support either a fair tax or they support a flat tax. And I believe that it's consistent with our Constitution, and I think we have to eliminate the 16th Amendment, which gives us income tax, which to me gives us the IRS, which is, I want to get rid of that. And I believe that it's consistent with the excise taxes and other taxes that are authorized by our Constitution.
Mr. Glenn.
Our federal tax policy affects our families. The decade I was born in, only about 15% of women of school-age children worked outside the home. Now it's like 80%. Should women be free to choose to do that? Of course. But do you think that's why they do it? Because they'd rather go to work and leave their kids in the daycare? No, it's because 2 wage earners now have to make money to be able to support a family. That's just one example. Our federal corporate income tax leaves us with $1.2 trillion American companies have made in other countries that are sitting in Cayman Islands and Swiss bank accounts, won't come back on shore, because as soon as they hit the beach, they got to write 40% of it to the federal government. We need that $1.2 trillion to come back and create American jobs. My favorite one, you know that one about putting it on a postcard, the flat tax, that's great, but whose name's on the other side of that postcard you send in? You still got to send it in to the most hated, feared agency in the United States government, the IRS. Fairtax.com, which would be authorized by the new Fair Tax Amendment that would eliminate the 16th while we're at it. That'd be the constitutional authority for it. Would eliminate that agency. It'd be like the Berlin Wall coming down in terms of a burst of freedom.
Mr. Glenn, it sounds like you're advocating getting rid of the IRS.
Yeah,
I'm hearing that correctly? Okay.
Yeah.
But if the fair tax is put into place, who's going to collect a tax from the businesses?
Well, it's collected by the states now. The states could collect it just like they do the state sales tax and then forward it to the federal treasury.
Okay.
And you don't need an IRS, including its 15,000 new Obamacare healthcare police. So we'd save money with all those employees no longer being paid from the federal treasury. It'd be a better tax that would implement economic growth, and we would remove that oppression from over your shoulder. Did I screw up? Am I going to get audited and be guilty until I'm proven innocent? It would be, from the freedom aspect, the most attractive reform.
Would you like this question repeated?
Yeah, please repeat it.
At the start of our nation, the founding fathers implemented tariffs and apportionment. Today we have a progressive tax system. Out of all the tax plans available, which one best represents your tax philosophy?
I think the flat tax is a better way to go. Yes, we can sit here and say, oh, let's get rid of the 16th Amendment and whatever, but families and businesses are hurting now. It's a very simple thing to bring the rates down, make it simple, make it flat, make it fair, and do it on a postcard and be done. Our families and our communities need their resources to keep them themselves. It's very easy to reduce the size of the IRS. Don't kid yourself. There will be another federal agency popping up on the fair tax. It's easy to say we don't like it. We don't like it. We can fire all those agents. They should be fired. Because if all you're doing is sending in a postcard, we just hire the mailman to take these. The point is, we've got to let our people keep more of what they earn. We need less taxes, less spending, less government, and more freedom. Let's do it and do it now, rather than wait a generation for another amendment.
Moderator follow-up. You asked about the flat tax. The problem from the fair tax side about the flat tax is there's more opening for special interest to get in there and carve out their piece of not being funded. And that's what they say is the difference between the fair tax, other than it being a consumption tax, and the flat tax. What would you do?
Well, first of all, the fair tax is a regressive tax on the poor, number one. Number two, that if in point of fact, if you bring it down and minimize or eliminate a whole series of these special interest things, which should go, that the IRS code should be thrown out, it shouldn't be any longer than the Constitution itself, and then we're done. And let people then focus on building their businesses, maintaining their families, and not being forced to work to pay the government.
Mr. Knudsen,
Yes.
would you like the question repeated? At the start of our nation, the founding fathers implemented tariffs and apportionment. Today we have a progressive tax system. Out of all the tax plans available, which one best represents your tax philosophy?
My tax philosophy corresponds with the founders' philosophy. I think that tariffs, duties, and imposts are the way to go, as well as apportionment. Just in case people don't know, the apportionment means that when you have a census every 10 years. The reason for the census was to determine the representation in Congress based on population of the total, as well as the apportionment of taxes that were not met via the tariffs, duties, and imposts. The states are a natural check against the federal government. Right now, an individual person cannot fight the federal government. Government says we want 30% of your wages, you pay it or else you go to jail. Government says we want 35%, you pay it or go to jail. You can't fight it. The states are a natural check. So if the government says we need money from the states can either pay it via a surcharge on their state tax if they want. They can pay it via royalties or whatever, if you're in the state of Alaska or whatever. But it's a natural check that's going to limit the insatiable appetite of the federal government.
All right, thank you. Let's go on to the next question. Entitlement. Mr. Hackman, you're first. Entitlement programs are the largest weight on our government's budget. What do you see as the role of government in providing a safety net?
All right, how much time?
1 minute. Excuse me. Thank you for reminding me.
Well, I've already spoken about that. Again, sometimes you refer to entitlement programs as being, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and I support the Ryan plan. It's not perfect, but at least it moves us in the direction of preserving these programs for generations to come. But I am so excited about a program that we are developing. I've already mentioned that these programs, the welfare programs, need to be transferred back to nonprofits, churches, extended families, and so on. The way we did it, where you get a person to person, where you can build people up, you can encourage them rather than just throw money at them, which is demeaning. But there's a great program that I'm a cheerleader of. It's called Social Enterprise. And this is a program that's being developed around the country, but it's in Grand Rapids. And let me just give you a flavor of the 15 seconds I have. Fred Keller, Cascade Engineering, has moved in the last 8 years 400 people using this great program from welfare to sustainable jobs, and as of today, 63% are still off welfare. We need this for our country to move people to sustain. We need everybody on deck to make this thing happen.